Julia, Tom Hitchcock, how are you?
Very good. How are you?
Yes, not too bad, thank you. That's a very designer top you've got there.
Thank you. I love fashion. I really do.
Okay, and you've also got a very broad accent. Whereabouts are you from?
Well, originally I was born in Siberia, and then my parents moved to Europe. First, we moved to France, then Spain, then Cyprus, and then finally made it to Montreal in Canada, and then moved to Toronto.
Yeah, there we are. So that's a fair bit of there's a couple of continents in there. Oh, yeah, a couple of continents, and and you're well travelled. Wouldn't have expected Siberia with an accent.
Well, you're in for a surprise.
There we are. Okay, well, listen, I'm looking forward to more surprises. The whole idea behind this podcast is for you to share your story, and hopefully there's things there that will help other people as well. So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself, Julia.
Well, I'm sure you are aware that I teach happiness and I teach unconditional love, which I think is very important and required in nowadays world, just because we're so high paced, we're so goal oriented that sometimes we forget the humanitarian part of life, where we're meant to help others, where we're meant to shine light. And I think a lot of people are not very familiar with the concept of kindness. And this is where I come in and I teach and explain to people what is it to be truly kind.
Okay, tell us more. Tell us more, and maybe what its relation is to happiness and everything else.
It was actually a while back when a friend of mine, we were talking, and she was kind of frustrated. And she was saying, I think my parents taking my kindness for weakness. And I said, why? Kindness is really a strength. And she said, no, I find that a lot of people really see it as weakness. And I said, wait, is it the kindness that is weakness, or is it the inconsistency that is weakness? So when we get to choose when we're kind and when we're not, who we're kind and who we're not, really what happens in that process is that we take on a persona of being kind, but that inconsistency of kindness really shows the person's true colors. And the
Okay,
reason I'm saying that is a truly kind person will choose to be guided by kindness, regardless of the person on the other end. And I'll give you an example. Like when I see angry people, somebody cutting me off in traffic or in line, I always smile and I look at that person with sympathy, because I always think that the person must have been in such a rush, and maybe there's something happening in their life where they're frustrating, where they need to make that abrupt or aggressive action. And I tend to meet it with kindness. And usually when I meet unkind people with kindness, magic happens, because it really melts their heart and it really puts their guard down, and it forces that person, no matter how angry or frustrated they are, to reply with kindness. And in the odd occasions when somebody chooses not to respond with kindness, really that has to do with their karma and their behaviors rather than self. Because when we are consistently kind without picking and choosing who we're kind to, that really gives us the identity as a kind person. Does that make sense?
it does. So, would you say, as a trait and the chopping and changing, do you think it's a trait that currently is receding in society?
Definitely. I think that people are fast too much rudeness and aggression rather than kindness. And I find that there is concepts of paying it forward. Like I don't know if you've seen videos and drive-throughs when somebody pays and then everybody pays forward. So there are movements, but I think overall there are parts of society where we feel insecure, where we feel bad about ourselves, where we don't love and accept ourselves, right? And that shows in criticism or being hard on ourselves when we don't succeed per se, right? But if we look at those aspects, when we don't love and validate ourselves, there are two reasons for that. One, is because we don't think we're worth it, or two, somebody else lowered our self-esteem, right? But if we look at both scenarios, and let's imagine that a person constantly chooses to work on themselves, do good deeds, help others, that person will be more likely to love and accept themselves rather than have insecurities, because their foundation will be, I'm a bulletproof good person because I'm good not on demand, but I'm good from the bottom of my heart consistently to everyone's around. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm curious on your point there on unconditional love. So I had quite a deep and meaningful conversation with a professor a few months ago, and we talked about unconditional love. And in the conversation, I talked about my dog, who's asleep right here, right now. And I was making what I seemed to be the fair observation that they display a lot of unconditional love, because they're even if you tell them off, they're back wagging their tail. Moments later, it's been passed, and they do what they can for you, you know. But he explained, well, you'd say yes, it's love, but it's not unconditional, because if you push things far enough, there's always a condition. There's always a point where there's a breaking point and what have you. So it's a general condition because he's constant, but there is a breaking point where it will shift, you know. And it's quite interesting. It's a debate. There's a debate, you know. It isn't necessarily his field of expertise. And I heard his, because I haven't seen outside of those observations. His point was valid to me. What's your thoughts on that take on unconditional love?
Well, there is always breaking points in everything, right? So I kind of want to take the breaking point apart from the unconditional love. And I really want to examine what is unconditional love and what is conditional love, aka utilitarian. Because really, we always choose a focal point of what we love someone for. But there's very different focal points that we can love somebody for. I'll give you a simple example first, and then I'm going to go into persona. For example, one can love their cell phone, right? It's very useful. It does a lot of functions. It helps us with our businesses, social life, you name it. But cell phone love is a utilitarian love, because if we were to lose a cell phone and replace it, a month later, we kind of move on. And a year later, we won't even remember about the old phone. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
However, if we take a painting, let's imagine somebody with real deep pockets gifts you a Mona Lisa painting. And let's imagine you love that Mona Lisa painting. Now, really, that Mona Lisa painting is not servicing anything to your needs. You can't sit on it. You can't, I don't know, use it for fire. The only thing you can do is admire it. You can love it because when you look at it, it creates certain emotion in you. Maybe it's nostalgic emotion, whether it's emotion of beauty. You know how we look at the flowers or clouds and we're just mesmerized by their beauty. So the same thing happens with people. We can love people for their functionality because somebody cooks, cleans, and I don't know, goes to work. Or we can love somebody for the way they laugh. We love that their ambition. We love for their kindness. We love somebody because just the way they drink coffee in the morning, you can look at them just like at the painting of Mona Lisa. You know what I mean? But it's a very different type of love where we don't really require anything from that person, but just being there with us. And really, the unconditional love always starts with self.
Mm-hmm.
Because the condition of love, really the underlying issue is the dissatisfaction. So that's when we want more. That's when we have expectations from the other person. But really, the moment we feel dissatisfied, that's our inner critic. And if you think about it, a lot of people are very good at criticizing themselves. They're very good at beating themselves down for mistakes. But those are the types of people that will criticize others as well. So in order to learn to love and accept others, we first have to love and accept ourselves, forgive ourselves, understand ourselves. And the moment we're no longer criticizing ourselves, that critic dies And therefore, we stop criticizing others. And when that criticism stops, we start accepting others with all their little quirks. Because if you think about it, right? Like I have a friend, and when she laughs, she makes a weird noise. I think it's adorable. I swear, every time I hear her laugh, I'm like, oh my God, I love it. However, we have another friend in common who is really triggered by that laugh. So to her, clearly that's not something that she could unconditionally love, right? And that's something that she might be critical about. However, she's also very critical about her own love. And normally, when you see that type of pattern of somebody being critical, right away, you can tell yourself that that person is the most critical to themselves.
Yeah.
And that's why when somebody comes to me and says, you know what, I want to learn to love unconditionally. I want to accept my husband unconditionally. I want to accept my kids unconditionally. I always ask the first question, do you accept and love yourself unconditionally? And that's when the person really starts with the first hiccup and saying, well, not really. Because we are so used to loving for something. You know, oh, I love myself when I'll make $1,000,000. Or I love myself when I quit smoking. Or I love myself when I lose weight. But why not love yourself now, right here? Because those issues that you are not loving yourself for, they're technically coping mechanisms that helped you survive up until this point. And instead of being grateful to your mind for helping you survive, you're beating it down that it's not good enough. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
And that's where I show people that no matter what they do, it's still accepted. So when I start to work with somebody and somebody opens up to me about their deepest demons or their dark side, and I say, hey, that's not a big deal. Okay, you snapped at your kid, but that's not a big deal. You know, I understand you were stressed out, and I explain to the person that it's okay to forgive yourself. That's when that pressure goes away. The person starts feeling at peace, accepting, and then love comes in.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, have you read a book called Whole Again?
No, but I've heard about it. You know what? You're the second person to mention. Maybe I should.
You should do, because it's actually quite complex. Okay, so it goes into what I would classify as a molecular detail on this topic, but to the point, it is this topic. It talks about different relationship types and how we connect with different people, but essentially focusing on yourself and unconditional love. So it'd be really good to hear your feedback on it, actually, when you do get to it. And also on the unconditional love component, okay, much like the previous one, do you think that's also a rising tide in today's society?
Yes and no. Because at the end of the day, everything starts with self. And I'll give you a great example. I have a client who went through the divorce. And he came to me and he said, you know what, Julia, I'm struggling. Because through the divorce, I lost everything and I lost my identity as a husband, as a father. So I'm at ground zero. And I have my ex-wife constantly telling me that I'm worthless, that, you know, I'm not good enough. And I really don't know how to build my self-esteem and get out of it. So I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. Do you have any plans on Sunday? And he's like, no, you know, like I'm not seeing any friends. I don't have kids. Really, all I just do is sit in my apartment and be miserable. I said, okay, so why don't you take this Sunday and go to a homeless shelter and help feed homeless? And he goes, that's not a bad idea. It will give me something to do, but why this task? I said, because when you go and you help somebody just out of the goodness of your heart, or when you set a goal of 2 or 3 good deeds a day towards strangers, guess what? When somebody is going to tell you you're worthless or you're useless, your psyche will not accept it because you know truly in your heart that you're not useless, that you're not worthless, that you are contributing to society, that you are doing good deeds, that there are people that really experiencing difference in this world because of you. And when people start to lead with that type of philosophy of contributing to society, rather than immediate family, which is also important, but it's also important to help strangers where we don't get that in return, but we get that feeling of satisfaction that I did something bigger, something better for somebody else rather than myself. And again, that builds foundation for happiness and really strong self-esteem that helps on the way of self-acceptance and self-love. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. Okay. And so you say you teach happiness. Okay. Okay. And there's definitions of happiness because, from my understanding, happiness is a temporary form. Okay, but the definition of it is different. Um, how would you say that correlates? I don't want to assume things. What's the correlation with these other components?
I love your question because I actually did a post on that recently. That happiness in reality is just a sense of peace. We are happy when we are at peace, when there is nothing at the back burner, when we don't have hundreds of things on to-do list, when nobody's on our back that we, forgot to do something, when we just in sense of serenity and peace, that's when our guard goes down. And that's when we truly experience in that sense of lightness and peace. However, a lot of people don't understand how to get to the sense of peace because in order to obtain peace in your life, we need discipline, we need organization, and we need balance. Because if we look at people, you know how some people, let's say they make millions of dollars, but they're not happy.
Mhm.
Some people, they have 5, 6 kids, but they're still not happy. Some people have been married for 30 years and they're still not happy. Because you might say, oh my God, she or he has the career of their life. They're a doctor. They must be happy. Or look at them. They have so many kids and I can't have kids. They must be happy. But really, when we choose one of aspect of our life, and we kind of put all our eggs into one basket. We concentrate on our family, or we concentrate on our career, or we concentrate on our children. We lose other aspects of us. And what are they? Self-care, right? Let's say exercising, working on your mind, reading, learning things, going for walks, spending time with ourselves, meditating. You name it, there's tons of things we can do for self. So that's one thing. Second is career. It's important to have career. It's important to have purpose in life, feel like you're helping the society, whether it's through picking garbage or doing podcasts to enlighten people. There's different ways we can really help with that growth. Then we have family, right? Our kids, our loved ones. And then we have social life, having friends around us, socializing with friends, combining friends and family. And really, when we take and allocate amounts of times that are somewhat equal within that self ecosystem, that's when we find balance. For people that bring work home and overwork, they will never have balance with their families. Their families will always complain that dad is never home, mom is always at work, nothing will ever be enough. And that level of dissatisfaction will kind of be like rotting roots that are not allowing the person to build that success. Because success is kind of like a foundation, it's going to be strong. So when we organize and say, okay, I'm waking up at 5 or let's say 6 a.m. and until 7, that's an hour me time. I'm going to have my coffee, I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to think happy thoughts, or I'm going to write my gratitude journal, or I'm going to do an exercise or yoga, go for a walk, whatever it is. But when you allocate that time, your brain actually looks forward to that time in the morning. And then, for example, you can allocate from 7 to 8, you spend time with family, have breakfast, and then 8 to 9, the person goes to work, works 9 to 5, concentrating on work, and then coming back home. But when we have those strong boundaries in between different parts of our lives and different parts of our identity, that's when we really gain that balance. And that balance is the victory taste that makes us feel happy.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes. So I'm curious. In the case of Julia, what was it that got you going into the rabbit warren of this?
I think I was different from the get-go in a sense that I always loved people. And when I was little and somebody would ask me what I want to do, I always wanted to help others. And my goal in any type of relationship was to bring happiness. Whether you talk to my friends or my husband, my objective is to put a smile on the other person's face. And I find that people value that because it's like a breath of fresh air. But that doesn't mean that I had a lot of pain that I worked through, because I was in therapy for almost 14 years, having different counselors. I tried church, I tried different group meetings, I tried different religions, I tried different psychologists, life coaches. I've tried different techniques, reading books. So this was quite a journey for me. But I remember my breaking point where I was sitting on the couch, and I remember I called my dad and I said, Dad, if hell exists, I'm living it. And I don't know what to do about it. And I remember my dad said a very smart thing. He said, if you ever think of taking your own life because you're so unhappy, just run away. Go into the mountains, go build yourself a hut, live by yourself, concentrate on yourself, find yourself, build yourself up. But at least if in 5 or 10 years you go wholesome again, where you find that peace, where you find that happiness, at least you didn't end your life and you can come back to the family you have. So with that in mind, I kind of obtained that concept, separated myself a little bit from my family in a sense that I created boundaries when I said, yes, as much as you need me to cook and clean and do the chores and work, I need to have my life because I'm unhappy, because I feel like I lived my whole life just serving others. And there's a lot of goodness in it. But again, it's all about balance. And before, for me, serving others was 100% of the time, where it left very little for my self-development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, all right. So anybody listening to this, your story resonates, they'd like to have a conversation with you, maybe they need some assistance to help them work on themselves and all the things that you touched on, what would be the best method for them to reach out to you, Julia?
I think LinkedIn. I also have my own webpage, Joy Place, and Instagram. I always reply to people. I always welcome people. I'm genuine at my heart to help others to obtain that peace and happiness, because if there's more people in this world that are happy, it really benefits me. It benefits my kids, it benefits my grandkids. So making world a better, happier place is definitely a number one goal. So I am willing to help anyone and everyone who is looking for some peace.
Love it. Okay, well, listen, thanks a lot for your time. And I love the purple fingernails as well.
Thank you so much for your time too. I love it.
Perfect. Have a good one. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. As before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.